is what I'm doing on Sundays. That's right, y'all. That's bacon frying. And let's get to it. So I got just a few minutes before my country biscuits are finished. The bacon will be ready, and we'll need to drip on the ever so popular and scarce Bounty paper towels while I fry up an egg. Oh yes, it's about to go down this Sunday morning. But what am I going to be talking about in this episode? Just bits and bobs. I'll discuss anything interesting from the New York Times that has nothing to do with COVID. If there's anything worth discussing, also from the New Yorker. I will be reading and giving you a little uptake or just a little discussion about the boss Demeter in My Not So Perfect Life by Sophie Kinsella. I will also discuss my feelings about the relief of duty of the Navy captain on the USS Roosevelt, and is that what we're doing? And some other anxiety reducing techniques that I plan to be using throughout this crisis. And I hope you will enjoy this episode as much as I have enjoyed creating it. And I also will be adding a little bit of a discussion about something called Headspace for those on the front line, the doctors and the nurses, and even first responders, similar to Talkspace as well as Doctor On Demand, because their mental health is key to our survival also. And again, thank you for joining me. Welcome to my midday yoga practice. I decided or added this routine during my live, prior to my live publication yesterday or the previous episode. But I decided that, number one, in order for me to effectively do this, I can't be trying to record at the same time as I'm actually trying to do the bends in the practice, because that's not just feasible and it's kind of crazy. But what I can do is record the breathing in the episode while from a different device, put it to the music that I was able to find on Spotify, and lead the practice. So we're going to start seated. Literally, this is a great stretch that you can actually do from the comfort of your home. We're going to start seated and we're just going to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. Inhaling and exhaling. Inhaling and exhaling. Inhaling and exhaling. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. We're going to start this part of the practice by sun salutations. This is taking both of your hands, stretching it above your head, breathing in, breathing out, coming back to Namaste. Inhale, and you're going to exhale and slightly bend to your left with your head facing to the right. Inhaling and exhaling. Coming up, centered sun salutation. Inhale, and then you're going to exhale, stretching to your right with your head facing to the left. Exhaling. Coming upright, sun salutation. Stretching all the way up, inhaling. Exhaling and stretching to your left with your head facing to the right. Stretching, sitting up straight. Stretching to your right with your head turning to the left. Exhaling. You're going to inhale, sun salutation, hands stretched above your head, and come to center Namaste. And this next one, if you have limited mobility at your waist or your back pain, do not attempt this. Only come as far as your back will allow it. You're going to take a deep breath in. Again, stretching your hands above your head, and then you're going to bend forward as far as ability, as far as you can. Exhaling. Inhale, sit up straight. Exhale. Going down. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale, sitting up straight. Exhale, down. Inhale. Exhale. Bending. Inhale. Exhale. Now we're going to sit up straight. Inhaling, sun salutation, coming back to Namaste. Exhale. Now we're going to perform the Ardha Mattapastana, which is the half spinal twist. With this, you're going to put your right hand on your left thigh, twisting to the left, inhaling, and exhaling, deepening the twist. Going to then turn to your center, inhaling, exhaling. Left hand on right thigh, and turning to the right, deepening a twist. Deep breath in, twisting to the left, exhaling, inhaling, turning to your right, left hand on right thigh, exhaling. Inhaling, coming back towards center to namaste. And in this, if you have the room, you're going to need to probably move your chair back for the seated butterfly poses, the Baddha Konasana. And I actually like this because it gives me a chance to not only stand up, but also to stretch out my legs. So in this, you're going to put both of your feet together and try and attempt to allow your knees to drop as close to the ground as they possibly can. Inhaling and then exhaling. You're going to twist to the left, right hand on left thigh, pressing lightly. Inhaling, exhaling, deepening the twist. Inhale, exhale, deepening the twist. Inhaling, exhaling, deepening the twist. And then turning to your right, left hand on your right thigh. Inhaling, exhaling, deepening the twist. Inhaling, exhaling, deepening the twist. Inhaling, exhaling, deepening the twist. And then you're going to come back to center, the Baddha Konasana, centered, taking it to your inhale. Exhaling, raising your hand, simply exhaling, and then raising your hands above your head and sun salutation, inhaling and exhaling back to namaste. And I hope you enjoyed this brief practice, and it will allow you to be centered in the middle of the day. With every cancellation, every postponement, now is the time to start reading. And it was never like there was never a time to read. Books are king. That's how we're going to increase your knowledge. And if you love to save on books, movies, and music, you've actually come to the right place. Navigate to Alibris.com, a premier online marketplace for independent sellers of new and used books, music, and movies, as well as rare and collectible titles. We connect people who love books, music, and movies to more than 175 million items from thousands of sellers worldwide. This is a partnership with independent professional sellers, and Marty and Dick, the founders, decided early on that Alibris would be an at-risk partner, not a listing service. This approach attracted a large number of independent sellers and now enables Alibris to offer over 100 million books for sale. This is more than Barnes & Nobles and maybe even Amazon together. Right now they have a $20 off sale, and you can use coupon code NORA, N-O-R-A, to take $10 off of an order of $75 or more. You can use Roberts, take $20 off of about $135 or more. And then you can use Storm, S-T-O-R-M. I will have all of these coupon codes as a reminder in today's podcast. So again, navigate to Alibris.com for all of these deals and more, and tell them that Felicia sent you. Now back to the podcast. So, if you have a podcast called TNFro is Reading, you probably should read, right? Well, there you go. And I'm still reading My Not So Perfect Life by Sophie Kinsella. And all I can do is wonder a couple of things. The first thing that I wonder is how would these characters, or how would they survive in a pandemic? For the most part, they are all extroverts in some way, shape, or form, and it would be very difficult, and you could see that they would have issues being self-quarantined. I would like to think that her protagonists, they usually are pretty industrious and they are up from the bootstrap people, so having to live without and maybe self-isolation would not be such a difficult thing for them. I think this character, Kat, she would be able to self-isolate and reinvent herself with no problem, but I think she would actually have a problem with self-isolating with her lecherous roommate or flatmate in her current apartment. I could see how her Demeter, who is probably one of the worst individuals and bosses written into existence of all times, she would actually probably implode or get sick and be in denial, and then all of the anxiety or stress laden colleagues within this advertising agency would also have an issue also. I would be sad that Kat's best friend, who's in New York, who's always out and about, either she would be wigging out or she would be one of the first to fall from the virus. And how this character would have to actually work with her finally recovered boyfriend, because all of the heads of the advertising agency would probably fall to the virus itself, and how she would have to lead by default because everybody either is sick or dead. A post-apocalyptic kind of rewording or rework of this book, I don't know if that would go, because that's just too dark to consider. But it's something that I just started, which is weird of me to think about. How would any of these characters survive? But because usually, and this is not to completely bash Sophie Kinsella, if you've read any of her other series, especially the Shopaholic series, all of those people the characters are a little bit vapid, but they have a little bit of street smarts, and they have to go through some type of urgency or some type of emergency or crisis, and they ended up getting on top a little bit by dumb luck, but they're not the strongest and smartest people. But I think this particular character, Kat, has strengths that she never considered, and she would be able to reinvent. She's trying to reinvent herself, but I think that would have to be fast forwarded in a pandemic situation, because I could see all of these people, including her beloved Alan, I think that's that dude, her love interest all of them would be sick. And one of the other next in command is so anxiety ridden that would freak out. She's the only one capable of basically allowing this advertising agency to survive, or helping it to reinvent itself in order to progress beyond and to survive these troubling times. I think that is just amazing. There's some cute things in there where they actually fly a drone and spy on the office building next door. I think it would be kind of cool if they would actually have to be forced to take over that building, because for some reason their building actually implodes or gets shut down. And using that particular drone also to force people by segments to stay off the streets and to listen to the healthcare authorities. Because I actually saw that they employed drones fussing at grandmoms in the Wuhan province over in China, and I think that's effective to scare the crap out of people. But the book itself actually is a very kind of romp, not really a rom-com, but a romp in a clear Sophie Kinsella voice, and I'm thoroughly enjoying reading it, in spite of my rewriting it pandemic style. But just some food for thought. It's not a bad thing. It's just my take on it in current circumstances is all. So what I found and find intriguing is the longer that I wait to post a podcast, the more I find to put in the podcast. And this segment is no different. Um, so welcome back to the show. I have the pleasure of being TNFro, the host of this podcast. And when I started this, or preparing for this podcast, this was originally supposed to have been posted on Thursday. My posting regimen was around reading the New York Sunday Times and then Star Trek Picard. Well, last week was, or week prior, was the final episode of Picard. And it was a zinger. I think probably that was one of the best episodes of the entire series. And granted, it was only 10 episodes, but it just made you wanting and will make the next iteration if CBS has bought further episodes after, and we'll see who survives the pandemic, and that is something that I never thought I would actually say, but it would make the next chapter of the podcast make sense because of the way it left. I have a feeling that this next episode with Admiral Picard having kind of a quasi kind of relationship with the Federation, headed up by Raffi and Seven of Nine, who, as an XB or an ex-Borg, are going to be rolling around and restoring order to the. That would be kind of cool. We'll be rolling around and restoring order to the wide-flung Federation outpost. And I just thought of something. I'm trying to get into writing and reading fan fiction, and I've spent a whole bunch of, also this past week, looking up the Fenris Rangers, and I just thought of Picard playing a role as Admiral, a quasi-admiral, and leading that up, but also helping with kind of like a Federation Council that's going to be run by women. He's more of a diplomat, and although it annoys me, it's going to take women with cooler heads to bring order back to the Federation. Because at every time it seems that the Romulans get beaten back, that's when the Klingons start tripping. So I honestly think the Klingons are going to are going to start tripping. But with, what is her name, Commodore O from the Romulans, uh, what's that girl's name? And Data's brother, Soong Jr., and the Sense, them heading up the Sense, and Elnor being the quasi representative and training instructor for the fighting corps, with Rios leading up the starships, and training for the pilots, uh, and Rafi and it seems like Rafi and Seven of Nine have a relationship, and they're going to co-rule or because that will be her true human balancing, and to be able to lead the XBs. With all of them working together, they probably are going to end up in some far-flung Deep Space 12 or somewhere like that as going to be their base. And it probably is going to be similar to Deep Space Nine and the wormhole and all of that. There's just so many things that they're going to be able to wealth of things and ideas that they're going to be able to um, base on. And I'm wondering if they're going to have probably a minimum of, to be able to do it appropriately, they're going to need at least 20 episodes, but I'm not sure if CBS is going to be willing to shell out the money, and if they have the writers, I'm sure, are going to have the bandwidth to be able to produce something of that magnitude with all those different storylines. However, if they could just like focus on one of those things, because that's what I'm going to focus on, the establishment of order, and being given them the time to establish the order, and who, using this cast of characters, how are they going to make a great a storyline that's going to make sense to the masses? Well, in my mind, I'm creating my own storyline, and I'm going to publish it, I guess, online. And if you read it and you like it and you think you have other thoughts, hit me up at TennesseeFroisring@gmail.com and then let me know what you think. Well, how I'm going to do it, in addition to mulling over these alternate alternate topics for discussion within the Star Trek verse, I've done nerd things like created a countdown to Discovery, purchased a Star Book script book with, of course, Seven of Nine becoming human, like her story of becoming human, because I wanted to get practice on writing dialogue, and as well as star charts. This is probably the coolest thing that I've ever bought in my entire life, because within the imagination of artists, all of the Star Trek, the history of the Federation, in 10 beautiful rendered star charts. And that's where I have gotten the idea of where they're going to need some place to be able to think this out. I got history of empire that is probably one of the oldest empires in the Alpha Quadrant, and how all of humanity may have descended from there. And I'm also looking at trying to find the location of Deep Space 12, and it does make sense. I think, did I ever find that? I see Starbase 11, Gamma Trianguli. Where the ham sandwich? Deep Space Nine, of course, is in the far flung part of the Alpha Quadrant. And it also is right on the edge. A part of the demilitarized zone is actually there, But the demilitarized zone in its current, when its forever iteration, doesn't exist anymore because the Romulan Star Empire imploded. So let's see. There are several star bases along there. It's just a place where you don't want them to be too far flung, but that actually just makes sense. So there's a Deep Space 3, but it's close to the Breen Confederacy, and the Breens are a little shifty. I think they probably worse than the Romulans. Somewhere cool, like next to the Zahadra Nebula. That's where Archer is. And there's a Deep Space K7 over by the Battle of the Binary Stars. And then somewhere that's too close to the Cardassians. I don't think the Cardassians are all that cute, so we ain't going. There's Trill. There's also of Cochrane. There's just so many places that they could, in fact, the Baku. Nah. I'm thinking Deep Space 3 or like Deep Space 12 is going to be a place that they should consider gathering at, that's accessible, someplace that's accessible to all of these different federations and the confederations, and that's easily gotten to. And it's probably, I'm going to also spend a little bit of my time continuing to review these star charts someplace hopefully that is kind of in between the Federation and other allies or unallied places where they have the resources, and then they can actually build their strength and be able to practice. You know what I mean? Maybe over where Free Cloud is, where I can actually, if I can figure out where that is on the star charts. But I'm not sure if this was produced with some of the locations that we have found in Star Trek. I don't know if they have Federation core of artists that actually would update something that is out of the imagination of one person. So we'll see. But I'm excited about doing that, learning more about the history of the Borg and the hatred and xenophobia of the Romulans. Just seems so extra. It really does seem extra to me. Why are they so xenophobic? When they're not even the oldest civilization in the galaxy. And I guess it does kind of parallel the xenophobia that we see on here on Earth with certain, even some foreigners like Arabic people, sometimes Hispanic people, black people, and anybody from the Caucasus. You know, that you're not even the oldest civilization on this earth and you still tripping. So they've just, the creators of the Romulans in this race just have taken it to be extra, to be able to highlight the stupidity of prejudice and xenophobia, I guess, in order to make it dramatic. And it wouldn't be Star Trek, and it wouldn't be entertaining, I don't think, if we didn't have a sometimes bad guy like the Romulans. So I have been much pretty much a couch potato forever. So COVID has only enhanced my ability to find other and cool things that I've never read before, that I've never watched before, and or just rediscovering things. Um, for example, now that Star Trek Picard has ended its 10 episode run, I'm rediscovering and rewatching a whole bunch of movies. I'm going to be inside anyway, it ain't going nowhere. So I read a lot, and I'm reading Sophie Kinsella now, and I'll be discussing that in another segment or another part of the podcast. But who is probably one of the greatest writers of all time? No one but Jane Austen. And I have read bits and bobs of the book itself, but I remember mid 2000s that I watched the BBC's 1995 version of Pride and Prejudice that completely blew me away. So that's when I started thinking of how many times has it been remade. I've seen a couple of the remakes. The one with that really skinny girl, I didn't really like the most updated one that came, I think, in 2003. I thought it was a bit forced, and I like the Lizzie character and the original Mr. Darcy. I can't remember his name. He also is heads up King's Speech, and I like that character in that book, in that movie also. But there have been so many remakes for this, for Pride and Prejudice. So I took the opportunity over again last Thursday to gather them all up on and utilize my Amazon Prime account as much as possible. And I came up with like 4 or 5 different versions. One of the Korean versions, which I would have loved to have watched, is not available on Amazon Prime. But the 1940s remake with Greer Garson as Eliza and Sir Laurence Olivier as Mr. Darcy was, I thought, it was not all that. Of course, it was in black and white, which did not really upset me because I'm actually in search for another movie. Oh, what is it called? Heiress. But what I found in the 1940s rendition of, but I digress. What I found in the 1940s rendition of Pride and Prejudice was the massive bonnets that were just so distracting. I thought the character or the actress who played Charlotte was actually prettier than what has been portrayed in subsequent versions of the movie. And the father in the 1940s version, of course, of the paternalistic view of women in the early 20th century, thought all of the daughters were silly, and he didn't single out Lizzie as the actual book portrayed it. And I thought the choreographed dance was definitely better in the 1995 version than the 1940s version. There's also a 2003 version. I don't know who any of these people are. I didn't care to know who any of these people are. The 2003 version was a modern, at that time, was a modern day take on the Pride and Prejudice. It was 5 college friends. I don't think, maybe Lizzie and Kitty were related, but none of them were actually sisters. The Jane character was from Venezuela. Eliza Bennett was some goofy blonde girl with a bug. And they were all stationed at this Bible college, which was hysterical. The only thing that I did find interesting was just how horrible Kitty and the Lydia characters were. And even Wickham, he was actually kind of cute, but he was actually a little bit more vicious and vindictive. It was a part where Mary actually sings some goofy rendition, and Lizzie actually stands up and shuffles her off of the stage. I thought Darcy, who is uber rich, of course, like Pemberley, etc., was, but he was actually, it looked like, and I didn't get a good look at the emblem, but it looks like he was in a cobra. That was one of the best things that I actually made me feel really good about that particular movie because of the car. And I also liked how they took different captions from the book. Like Mary worked hard for knowledge and accomplishment and was always impatient for display, which was in chapter 6. And how ashamed I should be that being married before 3 and 20. That was chapter 16. And it says, what are men to rocks and to mountains? One of the things that that I did actually find intriguing, it did help me go back and reread certain portions of the book, and even download to get the actual chapters, because this was from, they based some of these quotes or received some of these quotes from an earlier edition of Pride and Prejudice, which didn't match to the edition that I actually have at home, or that I had access to. So it took me a minute to actually find these quotes within the book itself. I think it encouraged me to read to make sure that, number one, those quotes are actually in the original pressing, and then two, they did take some artistic and Hollywood liberties, I thought, from the book itself. And last but not least was the 2019 version, which I did not know even existed, because there is a Pride and Prejudice ATL version that, or ATL edition, that I had to, and that's another thing. I'm glad I reminded myself. I have to go to Amazon and manage my subscriptions, because I need to make sure that I freaking cancel that subscription, because it just made me angry. I absolutely hated that. And I'm so sorry. I shouldn't say that, but I absolutely despise that particular edition. There were some redeeming parts of it. I thought the house where they had one of the mini garden parties was actually okay. I recognize a lot of the characters from other, like Tyler Perry and some other own theatrical renditions, but the main character that played Darcy, I hated those little tight European cut breeches he was in, and that old heish mouth. What was the purpose? He wasn't even the real estate guy, which Darcy knew, but he was kind of a little bit, he wasn't even, that was not even Wickham. I don't even know. That just kind of blew me away, how they dealt with all of that, because one of the younger sisters, the Lydia character, actually marries who ended up being Darcy's brother, and she has a kid out of wedlock, and how the family got around her. They didn't think of it as their shame. It was just quintessential Tyler Perry BS. I liked the part of the fact that, again, the house that they lived in, I thought was fly, but the Marietta Square does actually exist. But overall, I thought it was the sappiest. And I thought the 2003 version was sappy. This version was also equally as sappy. The only thing I could actually relate to was the Marietta Square and the Strand Theater as a backdrop, which exists in Marietta, Georgia. It was realistic in the fact that I know those places exist, and that the theater is actually historical, but the way they took liberty with the actual storyline, I thought it was just too sappy for words, and I think they could have done a better job with it. I didn't like it at all, and hands down, all of those versions, and I'm just so annoyed that I couldn't see the Korean version remake of Pride and Prejudice. But hands down, the 1995 version is still on by far the best remake of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. And I don't think it's one of those stories that doesn't need updating. The producers of those three versions, one, two, three versions, that took it upon themselves to addition to and to change the storyline. They could have saved it. I thought they could have been made different. They could have done it differently. And that's just my personal preference. So again, the 1995 BBC version, still hands down the best. There were different cool aspects of the remakes, but none of them will stand the test of time as that 1995 version. But who am I? I'm just a girl with a fro who likes movies, and that's one of my favorite movies. So I decided within the last couple of weeks that I'm only going to be able to look at updates specifically coming out of the mouth of the great Dr. Fauci. Can't trust anybody else on that board because people kowtow, and can't trust most of what anybody in this administration says. I also am only listening to updates from ground zero, literally in New York City. President Cuomo, and I say that not facetiously because out of everyone, he and his second in command, the mayor of LA, are doing a bang-up job. And also the governor, who I think is kind of cute, of California, I believe that they're doing a bang-up job in the updates and leading their states respectively and their cities respectively through this crisis. But what I found absolutely deplorable was the treatment of the Navy and the gentleman that actually sounded the alarm about COVID. This is unfortunately, captain of the USS Theodore Roosevelt, Brett Crozier, who was relieved of command when he raised the alarm earlier last week that his sailors on the ship needed to be quarantined to stop the spread of the virus. The Navy did not act rapidly, I guess, to his repeated requests. And if you've ever been in the military, you know how it is. You can't get through to people, or people say, we'll take it under advisement, but you need to proceed in a way that we think you need to proceed. They weren't acting fast enough, because we know the faster you act, this is how you decrease the spread. But the ship's already out of the bag. It just was reported today that he himself has fallen victim to corona. He tested positive. And they relieved him of his command, but it did not, I bet he was already infected because of the lack of tests. What should have happened is if they had proceeded in testing of everyone, the confirmed cases, if they were stable enough, and actually if the Roosevelt is like a floating city that I think it is, they may actually have ventilators, etc., on board, that they could have actually flip most of the open spaces to ICU or step down units, tested everybody else as they proceeded off of the boat with the rapid turnaround testing. And then even if you were negative initially, you still were 14 days. Everybody else, you minimum lockdown. If you came back positive, you minimum lockdown for 3 weeks. And then proceed to other locations if you actually are sick. The ship could actually also then be flipped into a floating hospital boat, another hospital city, because of, if you know the size of an aircraft carrier, that it is in fact a floating city. Instead of cover up and subterfuge, this another disaster out to sea and in our military could have been thwarted. I can't even imagine what the other people are doing in bases flung across the world, if they are also on lockdown, and if what measures they have potentially put in place to prevent the spread and the knockdown of the military in this time. And hopefully it won't be like the 1917 pandemic, that when it was actually spread by the military. So his treatment and the lack of guidance in this disaster is testament to the disarray and lack of leadership from the top on down. And it's just highlighting why this administration has to go. And a lot of the top brass who are sycophants and keep kowtowing to this fool, why they need to go too. And I'm just hopeful that upcoming leadership will do better than what we actually have now. A thoughtful and staged approach to preventing further spread, and how to shore up the infrastructure and take care of people that are going to fall ill to this. The next several weeks, I think, are going to be horrible, and we're going to need some rationality and clear leadership going forward. And what we have now is just not it. And we can't continue. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. But there's always hope, and I'm hopeful there are some people, if they don't get fired or relieved from command, that could also lead us through a cohesive and thoughtful means to take care of the people, because we're obviously not getting it from the highest up of government at this time. If you already was given the government a side eye, even prior to this disaster, this is just highlighting why people give big government side eye, because they're incompetent and they're just downright stupid. And the treatment of Captain Crozier is testament to the absolute disarray and dysfunction of leadership in this country at this time. And that's all I got to say about that. And this is it. I'm promising myself I'm only going to refer to the epidemic in just general terms going forward. You can get all the bad news that you want to within the New York Times, and always on CBS and other networks. And I'm just not going to use my podcast to spread that negativity. I'm hopeful that I can entertain you and make you feel better in these appalling. The truth is actually already out there. I don't need to pile on. But I thought I had to just comment on this, because it was just so silly. I just couldn't even imagine. And now that I heard that this guy actually tested positive, and I'm wondering how he's going to be able to be taken care of now that he is no longer on ship. But at least all of them hopefully are going to get the help that they need. Making sense out of chaos. I started sheltering in place months ago, and it wasn't because of the pandemic per se or in any means. It's just because I have naturally introverted and hermit-like tendencies. However, in a time as such as these, where every single day you could suffer from PTSD just by watching the news, or subjecting yourself to any of the Trump-led how can we say it? The Trump-led diabolicals every single day in his newscast. It can make you turn more inward, and sometimes being inside of your head is not a safe place to be. There has to be a way to positively make sense out of the chaos without turning in on yourself like an autoimmune process and eating away at your insides, because that's not healthy at all. You think coronavirus is a killer. Letting your mind go and turning in the chaos on yourself is not not how to do that. There's help for you to do that. That's where a blog, and the blog as well as the people at Headspace can actually help you. They actually have free help during this time also. And it says here in who they are, it says we're here to help. There are a lot of unknowns in the world right now, but one thing is certain: Headspace is here for you to help support you through this time of crisis. We're offering some meditations you can listen to at any time. These are part of a larger collection in the Headspace app, free for everyone, called Weathering a Storm. It includes meditation, sleep, and movement exercises to help you out, however you're feeling. It's our small way of helping you to find some space and kindness for yourself and those around you. There are meditations for relieving the stress, walking at home, and when you're feeling overwhelmed. We all have to come to some means while we're all living in close quarters to not only not to turn the chaos in on ourselves, but not to strike out on the dog or the cat or the bird or the kids or the husband or the wife. It is a way to, again, bringing calm to the chaos. And Headspace is not only there for just individual people, it's also there for healthcare professionals when you need, and when you're still working, and educators. They have several techniques, and I think you should head over to headspace.com/COVID-19 to figure out how they and the creators can be of service in this chaotic times. I'm over there now, and I'm finding great solace in there. Another means to, again, make sense out of the chaos. This podcast is my path of entertainment and a form of therapy and an outlet for creative freedom. But if you don't have this outlet and you're struggling with depression, anxiety, or addiction, call 1-800-273-8255. It's available 24 hours a day, every day. And there's also an on-site chat feature at suicidepreventionlifeline.org/chat/. If vodka is your problem, call 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-4357. Then there's also apps like Talkspace and Doctor on Demand that will actually be able to help you right where you are in the privacy of your car at a fraction of the cost of conventional therapy. It's okay not to be okay, and it's definitely okay to ask for help. Please navigate to www.Dale's Angels Inc. for all special offers and updates on nerd news, as well as you can drop me a line at TennesseeFroisReading@gmail.com, or even leave me a 2-minute non-trolling message at 423-463-0658. All non-trolling messages may actually be read or played during the podcast. If you like what you're hearing and you want to support continued great content, please become a patron at podbean.com/thetalkingfro, or put 5 on it and leave me a tip at paypal.me/FeliciaDAI. And I hope you have enjoyed this podcast as much as I have enjoyed creating.